everyone, welcome back to Pathogems. I'm Caroline.
And I'm Aryn.
And today we are joined by Dr. Dana Hawley, who is a professor in the Department of Biological Sciences here at Virginia Tech. Her research focuses on disease ecology, including how diseases spread through wildlife populations and how the pathogens evolve over time. So everyone, please say welcome to Dr. Dana Hawley. Woo!
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what first sparked your interest in biology and wildlife disease ecology?
Quick background about myself. I grew up as an Army brat, so we moved around a lot. My dad was a career Army officer, and neither of my parents knew anything about science or were interested in science, but I always loved animals. And the only thing I knew that people could do with a love for animals as a career was be a vet. So I kind of grew up thinking, I'll be a vet, right? Had no idea research was a thing. When I got to college, I did know I wanted to be a biology major because I did love animals, but didn't know anything about research. And then my sophomore year, I happened to be sitting in a large class, I think it was zoology, and a new professor came in and said that he was looking for help with his research program. And I thought, well, I don't know what this is really about, but why not? I'll try it. And he happened to study birds, and that was kind of my first introduction to research. And I fell in love with both research as a field, but also with birds and studying wild birds. So I decided at that point that rather than go to vet school, that I could actually study wild animals as a different way of having a career that involved a love for animals. So I applied to do a PhD, and at that point had never heard of the field of disease ecology. I went to a liberal arts kind of undergraduate college, so we didn't have very specialized classes, and the field was still relatively young at that point. Really, disease ecology kind of was born in the late 70s, so it hadn't been around all that long. And so I went to graduate school actually just thinking I would study birds, but I was really interested in how behavior and the physiology of birds kind of interacted. And I happened to be interested in studying a bird that had a big disease outbreak in their populations, like the couple of years before I arrived to do my PhD. And so it really was kind of an accidental happenstance, like driven by this wildlife disease outbreak. But what's, I think, really fun is that now, looking back, I think wildlife disease ecology is kind of the perfect field for me. If I had known about it in advance, I probably would have chosen to go into it because I've always really liked everything from the sort of molecular level of biology up to the ecological level. I enjoyed all of those different classes in college, and disease ecology is really fun because you can integrate all of those different aspects into your research. But I can't say that I kind of planned that in advance and thought, like, this is the field for me. It sort of just happened, and I'm very glad it did. Yeah,
that's awesome. What made you kind of realize that you wanted to go more so the graduate route than the veterinarian vet school route?
It was a combination of things. One was that I did some volunteering at a veterinary clinic and realized that a lot of the job is interacting with the people more than the animals, and that wasn't so much my thing. I really, I like people, but pet owners, everyone has a different perspective on how they want to handle a pet medical situation, and I found that aspect to be kind of hard for me. And then I also realized when I started doing research that I love being curious about things and watching animals, and that was exactly what research allowed me to do. It felt like I was getting paid to kind of do what I enjoyed doing as a child, which was being outside, or even inside. Some of my research is in captivity, but getting to watch and observe animals and think about what's happening and why it might be happening. And I found that to be really, really fun. The other key was a super supportive undergraduate research mentor who really encouraged me and said, you can do this. You are great at research. You should go to graduate school. And honestly, until he said that to me, it never would have occurred to me to do a PhD. I just didn't even know what that was about, or I never had thought about like how the professors that taught me that got to that point. It just didn't occur to me. So I was just kind of living in the moment, enjoying research, and he said like, no, you should go get your PhD and consider this as a career. And even all through graduate school, I don't think I really imagined myself becoming a professor. It just didn't seem like something I could do, but I'm glad that I didn't let that stop me, because I think as I went further and further along, I realized I was gaining all the skills that I needed to do this job. And by the time I finished graduate school, I realized like, oh, I can do this job, and this is a very cool job. So it's kind of 1 year at a time, but I think having a supportive mentor is really important. So
yeah. After your PhD, did you go straight to becoming a professor, or did you have some years in between?
I did a postdoctoral fellowship at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington. Yeah, which was really neat. I was actually based at the zoo. They had a lab that is based at the zoo, but we didn't interact very much with the zoo animals. But I did get to do a few things, like they needed genetic sexing done on some kiwi chicks at one point when I was a postdoc, and so even though my research was all sort of immune genetics of songbirds for my postdoc, I got to participate in trying to figure out the sex of the baby kiwis, which turned out to be more challenging than we expected, because kiwis are unusual. But it was really fun being based there and getting to being more at like a research institute than a university. But it did also make me realize I thrive, I think, in the university setting where you have like students, and which wasn't as common in my postdoc.
Yeah.
So.
Is that the main difference between like a research institute and a university, is kind of like the presence of students, or are there other things that
That's
you
a great
notice?
question. I think it depends a lot on the type of the institute. There are some that certainly have relationships with universities, and you can have graduate students, but generally there's not much of an undergraduate presence, and so I think you have fewer, your duties are more restricted to research, which I love, but I also love teaching, and I think I would not enjoy a job that was only research as much. It's also different in that you're expected to raise most of your, or if not all of your salary, often from grants if you work at a research institute, whereas here we can raise funds for summer, but we have a salary during the academic year that comes from the university. And I think there's just a broader, on a university campus, there's a much broader scope of academic work happening, so you can go to a lot more diverse seminars and collaborate with lots of different types of labs, whereas a research institute is typically going to be a little bit more narrow in what research they have going on. But I really like being on a campus where you can have people all throughout the university that are approaching like somewhat similar problems or complementary problems, but from different perspectives.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, next question. So your research focuses on disease ecology, and for the listeners who may not be familiar with what that field is, what exactly is disease ecology and why is it important?
It's a great question. Yeah, disease ecology really takes the study of infectious disease and tries to put it in this ecological and evolutionary context. And so a lot of the questions we're asking are, why do we see so much variation in, say, the likelihood of an outbreak happening? Why are some host populations more susceptible than others? Why are some pathogens inherently more harmful than others? Are they evolving to cause harm because some aspect of that actually increases the pathogen's fitness? So a lot of the questions are kind of what I think of as why questions, in terms of understanding what are the kind of ultimate drivers of infectious disease, and what is the role of like the environmental context. Some of you may have heard of this idea of the disease triangle, where you don't necessarily always get disease as an outcome, even if a host that could be susceptible to a pathogen is exposed to it. And a lot of times I use the COVID example, where you might have COVID present in your household, but not everyone is necessarily going to get sick, even though you might have a very infectious strain like in that household. And that can result from a lot of factors. It could be something about variation among the hosts in their kind of susceptibility, but it can also be aspects of the environment that sort of matter, things like temperature, how's the nutrition of a host individual. And these are the sort of questions that we ask in disease ecology, is trying to look at disease from a more kind of holistic standpoint of what are the factors that lead to these outbreaks, and what are the key things about the pathogens themselves, the host, and the sources of variation there, including things like sex and nutrition and stress, and as well as what are the aspects of the environment. So how does the temperature or the ecological community in which that host pathogen interaction is occurring, how does that affect the dynamics of the host pathogen relationship?
Yeah. Amazing. You want to go?
Sure. Okay, so a lot of your work involves studying infectious diseases in wild bird populations. Why are birds such a useful system for understanding disease transmission?
Yeah, I think there's a number of reasons why birds are great systems. Some of them relate to their similarity to humans, which I know it's going to sound kind of crazy, but birds are very social animals, so a lot of them have social lives that are not that different from those of humans. So we can understand a lot about how transmission kind of within groups of birds and between groups of birds operates by studying birds. Birds also have immune systems that are quite similar to humans, and so we've been doing a lot of work in our system on understanding what we call partial immunity, where birds can become reinfected multiple times with the same pathogen, but they have some degree of protection. And so they're less likely to get severe symptoms, but they can still become reinfected. And this is actually a lot like COVID in humans. And so we can understand a lot about like what selection does that place on the pathogen when that's happening. How do these birds that have been infected before but get infected again, are they like contributing to transmission? Questions that are important in human populations but are hard to kind of experimentally, of course you don't want to experiment on humans.
Yeah.
Birds are also important to study because they're just a hugely important part of biodiversity. People love birds in general. I think there's a lot of people that have this kind of special connection to birds that kind of roped me into studying them. They're easy to see. You can see them from anywhere. They're often brightly colored. They are one of the forms of wildlife that we have the highest level or ability to connect with on a day-to-day basis. They're out in the open during daylight for the most part. And a lot of bird populations are being affected by pathogens. So understanding which bird populations are most susceptible and why is really important for us to be able to conserve this taxonomic group that is really important in its own right ecologically, but also has this kind of ecosystem service for people by even like promoting our mental health and well-being by kind of connecting us to nature and giving us that joy. I feel like there was another reason I was going to give, but and then the last reason is that birds in some cases are important reservoirs of zoonotic pathogens or those that affect humans. So West Nile virus is a big one where the songbirds that I study actually replicate the virus in a mosquito to bird cycle that then sometimes spills over into humans. So understanding what's happening in birds when they're infected with this virus has direct implications for human health as well. And then of course bird flu is something that many people have heard about, and so birds are can be important sources for these diseases that can spread to humans as well.
Are there any vaccines for birds?
There are not. Poultry. There are vaccines for poultry, but for wild birds, I'm not aware of any vaccines for wild birds. It would also be very hard to distribute them.
That was going to be my follow-up question. Who's giving wild birds shots?
No.
And it wouldn't be me.
There have been some folks that have tried to give birds essentially a vaccine in their food, like is done for rabies. But as far as I know, it wasn't a vaccine so much as I think they tried to put ivermectin into seeds, mix it into seeds to try to see if they could prevent West Nile virus. So I think there are some attempts to see, like at a more population level, can we somehow deliver a medication to birds that would help them? But it is generally pretty challenging for birds. They're not quite as easy to do these oral baits with as a lot of mammals are. So
Yeah.
Cool. But like my parents are really big in feeding birds. Like we have a lot of bird feeders outside, and I know that that's very common. So is there a role of like people feeding birds and like disease transmission at all?
That's a great question. Yes, there definitely is. But feeders are interesting because they can have effects in making outbreaks worse, but they can also have ways that they kind of dampen outbreaks. So a few examples of ways that we know feeders can kind of make birds at higher risk for disease. One is that if you give birds extra food, often that means their population size can be larger. So more food generally equals more birds. And we know one of the kind of classic relationships in disease ecology is the more hosts you have out there for a pathogen, the more likely an outbreak. It just makes it easier for a pathogen to kind of invade and cause an outbreak in a population. So we know feeders, to some extent, increase the size of certain bird populations and probably therefore make them more kind of vulnerable to disease. The other role that my lab is mostly focused on studying is that feeders are going to make it a lot more likely for birds to come into contact with each other. And that's in two ways. One is that they might be directly contacting each other more because they're fighting over those yummy food resources. So if it's an especially good type of food, you might see a lot of these kind of aggressive interactions happening at the feeder. Those are fun to watch, but they may also lead to disease transmission. But probably the most common type of transmission from feeders is from the actual surface of the feeder. Because essentially, if you think about it in humans, if we all went into a cafeteria and sequentially just used the same plate one after another without washing it, then there's going to be an issue there. And for birds, you add in the fact that sometimes their fecal matter is also getting on those perches, and so you have opportunity not just to transmit things from the saliva, or in the case of the bacterial pathogen I study, the conjunctival fluid they kind of deposit onto the feeder, but also any kind of GI parasites in the feces can get in there. So that is a primary way that feeders can cause disease outbreaks. But the good news is that there are simple things that people can do, and one thing we've been studying recently in the lab is whether a very simple method of feeder cleaning, of just wiping down what we call the high use surfaces, so the perches, any of the areas maybe around, if you have a tube feeder, the port that the bird may kind of stick its head into to get the food. If you take an alcohol wipe or a bleach wipe and just kind of wipe that down for 30 seconds, it removes all viable pathogen that's present. And doing that, every time you go out and you fill your bird feeder, that's probably at least doing something helpful to kind of reduce the amount of accumulation of pathogens on that feeder. And that's a lot easier than going out, taking down your bird feeder, dumping out the food, putting it in a dishwasher, soaking it in bleach. Nobody wants to do that. I didn't do that. We don't have bird feeders now because we have bears, but when we did, it's like, no. I know. I mean, I don't even do that to my household. So we're trying to look for simple ways that people can still enjoy birds and give birds the benefits of feeding them while doing what we can to protect bird health.
Yeah.
And then I mentioned that feeders we think can also kind of dampen disease outbreaks, and the couple ways that can happen. One is that feeders, by if you're feeding birds relatively high quality food, there's some evidence that that's going to put them in better condition, and so maybe they are faster at recovering from infection, and this is overall going to reduce the spread of disease in the population. And it also means that at a population level, you have a lot more recovered birds that are out there in that population, so they're essentially kind of vaccinated against the pathogen naturally, and so this is going to make it a lot harder for that pathogen to kind of break out in the population, and that's something that we think feeders are doing, even if birds are getting not a high degree of infection that they recover from, but maybe they're kind of vaccinating themselves in some cases by just visiting a feeder surface a lot and getting a low dose of pathogen that's not necessarily causing them to show any disease, but this may be kind of like a vaccine booster where they're getting this repeated exposure to the pathogen, the antigens for the pathogen, and mounting an immune response. And a former graduate student in my lab was able to show that even birds that didn't get sick from these frequent low doses could mount a protective immune response. So sometimes these feeders might be kind of serving as vaccinators almost for, so germs are not always a bad thing. And I think, feeders in general are, it's difficult to say. People always ask me, should we take down our bird feeders? And my perspective is that the bird that I study wouldn't really probably be around at all without bird feeders. The bird feeders themselves are what's keeping these birds so common and present. And so it's kind of a trade-off. We feeders have ways in which they're going to increase survival of birds over the winter, increase populations, and so in those ways we might consider them good for birds, but also ways in which they might be, what we consider harmful to bird populations. So I think trying to feed in ways that kind of maximize those benefits and minimize the harm is really important, because I also think it's great when people are enjoying birds at their feeder. That's a great thing for bird conservation more broadly if people are engaged with birds. So on the whole, I think bird feeding is probably a good thing for birds at the kind of conservation and population level, but there are certainly times where it is going to cause declines in bird health, and I think using best practices when people do observe outbreaks at their feeder is really important.
Yeah. Kind of as a follow-up to that, do you bird? And if so, do you have any recommendations for people who are kind of wanting to get into it?
That's a great question. I do bird, but I am not what many people would consider a birder. I didn't grow up liking birds. As I mentioned earlier, I kind of fell into studying birds, but I do love to watch birds. So most of my birding is kind of enjoying watching what a bird is doing. I do, of course, love to see rare species as well, but I don't tend to go out and look for just a total number of species, for example. I'm more of enjoying watching what the bird is doing and how they're interacting with others type of birder. For those that are interested in getting into birding, there are a lot of great resources, particularly from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So many of you might have the Merlin app. Merlin is a free app that can be super helpful in identifying birds. It's based on your location, and it can help you identify by both sight and sound. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology also has great resources for kind of learning how to identify birds. And I would say to just start with, like, honestly, starting with some of the more open habitats can be easier. It's really hard to bird in a forest because, especially when it's summer and all the leaves are out, it can be very discouraging because the birds are staying hidden behind the leaves. So I think starting at bodies of water and areas where you might have open fields where you can get better views of birds can be really helpful. There are also lots of local birding opportunities. There's a New River Valley Bird Club that anyone is welcome to join, and they have field trips, and so getting out and birding with other people that know how to bird is a great way to learn. There's also a Virginia Tech birding club as well that welcomes participation from anyone. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Great. I have another follow-up question kind of with the bird feeders.
Yeah.
Has anybody ever looked into the impact of squirrels? Because I always have squirrels in my bird feeders at my house. And, like, I would assume that they could either, like you were saying earlier, like, make it worse or make it better. But has anybody ever really looked into that?
For disease in particular?
Yeah.
That's a great question. We know that the feeders attract squirrels, and a lot of people specifically pick feeders that will minimize use by squirrels.
Yeah, because
you
they
get
eat all the food.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're like, well, what am I paying for? I'm feeding the squirrels, you know? Although it's always entertaining me. Some people love feeding their squirrels. I don't know if you've seen some of these YouTube videos of people that like enjoy torturing or feeding their squirrels, depending on the person. But I don't think anyone has looked at whether squirrels could actually be kind of reducing disease transmission, because I would imagine that having a lot of squirrel activity could kind of dilute out some of the interactions between birds themselves. Maybe the squirrels are even kind of cleaning off some of that pathogen. That's a fascinating question. I've never thought about it. So maybe you've opened up a new research direction
Guys,
here.
if you guys use that, please credit me.
For an acknowledgement.
Absolutely.
Put me on the paper.
Although I do not personally want to study squirrels. They're like
No, they scare me. They scare me too.
Yeah, they're
I'm not
terrifying.
I'm not
but,
good with wildlife.
but it would be really interesting to have feeders where you exclude squirrels or don't. And look
Yeah.
at,
What's
is
going
there
on?
a difference in disease prevalence? Yeah, that's fascinating.
We'll see.
Okay. Do you want to just ask our
Fun questions?
fun questions?
So we have two fun questions that are bird related.
Okay.
So the first one is, what's your favorite bird?
Oh, this is always a hard one because it depends on the day. My favorite bird is probably the dark-eyed junco, which is not a very brightly colored bird at all. It's gray, blackish gray, but I just think they're super cute, and they're one of the first birds I ever studied, and so they've just always been one of my favorites. My other favorite right now, this is more of a in the moment, is the indigo bunting, because I just saw one yesterday.
This is the dark-eyed junco. Providing images.
Nice.
What was the other one?
Indigo bunting.
Wait, you saw one?
Yes, and we catch them on occasion in our nets.
Oh, this is beautiful.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
have
that
just
is
the
really
most.
pretty.
My dream bird is to see the painted bunting.
Oh,
my gosh.
they are incredible, right? Indigo buntings have the most unusual shade of blue.
Bright blue.
It looks like it should not exist.
It looks like somebody dipped him in the dye.
exactly.
Paints
So-
it up. What's
Yeah.
your favorite bird?
I don't know if I have one.
Oh, I
I'm
do.
not a birder.
I do. A hummingbird.
Oh,
Because
that's
they
a good
seem
one.
the smallest and the least violent out of all of them.
Hummingbirds are actually very aggressive.
Really? I like making the sugar water that they drink.
Yeah.
They are. They're
outside.
fun to watch.
They're very fun to
The way they
watch.
can fly is amazing.
If I had to pick one, I guess a crow.
I think they're so smart.
That's the worst
They
answer
are.
ever.
They are super smart. I am with you.
They
I love
are.
crows. Like,
They're
they are
so
so
fun.
They're
fascinating.
creepy. I don't like
They
them.
live in these
Morbid.
cooperative groups, and they are so smart. I would
Yes.
never study them because they are way too smart. People that study them, they will learn your vehicle, and they will harass your vehicle. Even somebody that I knew in graduate school that studied crows and then sold his vehicle, they harassed the people he sold his vehicle to. That's how smart these birds are.
Oh,
They're so smart.
my lord. Okay. Okay, that puts them even farther down on the list for me. That puts
Yeah.
them farther down the list. And then you can probably phrase the last fun question better. It's not on here.
Okay. So one question that we have that we've debated ourselves is if all of the birds in the world went missing, how long would it take you to notice?
Yours is probably pretty quick.
Yeah.
I mean, if I were inside, it would take me until I probably
Just like a
outside,
regular
but
day. So
a
we're talking
regular day.
hours.
Oh yeah, if
Okay.
not minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Her
shortest
answer is, what is your answer?
I don't know.
The
It's gotta be.
original
The
It's
original
gotta
was
be
like
Days or
No, it's
It
gotta
went
be
into
like a
weeks
month.
or months.
Oh,
what?
Because mine would be quick too, because I think I'd feel a sense of ease.
Yeah.
You know, I'd be like, whew, there's no more birds around.
I
Yeah.
think Aryn originally said 1 year.
I do think I think that was
Which
maybe
is
my
crazy.
original
You're
answer.
what? Do you mean? You're not gonna hear. It's gonna be.
I don't
awfully
know
quiet.
because I don't like watch for birds
right.
and I'm not that observant. So I think
She's
that,
not.
and I have a really bad memory, so I don't think I'd be like, oh, yesterday I didn't hear any birds.
Oh
I think
my
I'd just be like,
goodness.
oh, it's weird the birds aren't out. I think it would just be like me
It's a
being
good thing we
loopy.
didn't rely on you to write Silent Spring. Instead.
Yes. That
Never
wouldn't
would
be
have
my
gotten written.
forte.
Yeah.
No.
We didn't notice anything
Yeah.
different.
I do think I'd probably realistically be like a week. Maybe.
I still think that's crazy.
But I don't
long.
know.
This is hilarious.
Mine would be probably the first time I stepped outside.
Yeah.
Maybe the second, because the first time I'd be like, oh wait, maybe there's just no
That you
birds
happily
anymore.
stepped outside.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be smiling. I'd be smiling.
I think you
Yeah.
need to take an ornithology class because you would learn to love
My mom
birds.
told me the same thing because my mom loves birds. She has a little bird book. She always
Yes,
has it in her
yes.
purse just in case.
Yeah.
She's got the Merlin app. But yeah, I don't know something. I don't like that they're doing something that I can't do, and that stresses me out.
But they're flying?
They're flying, and my incident with a parrot. One time, a parrot landed on my shoulder and
they
pecked
can
my
be
head.
they can be scary. Well,
that ruined it
one
for
of the
me.
things I love most about teaching ornithology is that there were always students that started the class hating birds, and by the end, they loved birds, or at least didn't hate all of them.
Is there a graduate level ornithology course?
There is not, but you can
Can I
sit
sit
in
in?
on the
Yeah.
undergraduate.
Guys, we'll check back in.
I'm taking it vlogging.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all we have
Yep.
for today.
Awesome.
That's
That's
it.
really fun. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. Yes.
Anytime. Appreciate it.
Woo! Yay!
You may have noticed we have some new clothes on.
Yep, we got
Pathogems merch!
We got some Pathogems merch. We got this beautiful. What kind of gray? Not heather.
I was gonna say Heather.
Heather
like a
gray.
light gray.
A light heather gray.
Yeah.
Quarter zip. It's got a nice interior.
It's super soft.
And here we have our Pathogems logo.
Limited
embroidered.
edition.
Limited edition.
Thank you, Sarah.
Special release. There's only 3 of these available
Yeah.
ever.
3 in the world.
And
here's the third.
Yeah.
There's the
Boom.
third. Sorry, not
Yeah.
for sale.
Thank you, Sarah. We love you.